Okay, so I'm going to make a little jig up that will let me rotate this and put on the winding for the secondary of the Tesla coil. I make quite a lot of things with these skateboard bearings. These are standard El Cheapo ones. They happen to have an 8mm inside diameter, and it fits very nicely over this 5/16 threaded rod. So the idea is to take this piece of PVC tube cut down to size with a couple of these end caps on. Let me get rid of the drill. Drill some holes in the end, then I'm going to thread the rod through, put bearings on either end in perhaps some wood blocks, and make a little handle so that I can rotate this as I wind the wire on it, and also so I can paint the varnish on it a bit more conveniently. So for what I'm going to build, at least initially, the idea is that, and the final thing, the box will have one of these things sitting in the lid, held on by this adapter, which I'm going to use as a nut, and then I'll be able to plug the secondary into the top, and I'll make some supports for my primary that's going to sit around here. So the first exercise is to drill a hole through the top here, mark a couple of lines on it at approximately 90 degrees, and we'll find the center. Let's see how this goes. You can now line this up. And that's where we want to put the center. I'm going to start with a little tiny drill. And just put a center in. Ooh, that's a bit fast. For plastics, we generally want to go a bit slower than that. So now you can see we have a hole down through the middle. So the next thing to do is to chop the tube off to size, and there are lots of ways you can cut this. You can stick it in a radial arm saw and chop it off if you're feeling brave. You can cut it with a hacksaw, or you can cut it with a set of PVC pipe cutters. Now in this case, I don't particularly care if the ends come out square, because they're going in these caps, and the end ones are going to end up in that. So we can just hack it off. So I'm just going to estimate with an end cap on. Takes about that much plastic. We're going to have another end cap at this end. We want the rod with its irritating piece of plastic removed. It's always lovely to try and get the glue out of the threads. So we want this just long enough that we can get it through a piece of wood with a bearing sitting in the middle of it, or something like that. I haven't decided what I'm going to make yet. And enough that I can make a little handle to go on the end. So I'm thinking to leave a couple of inches out each end. So with the end caps on, I'll be able to put this thread right through the middle. So these are going to sit on the ends. Stick them in a couple of wood blocks, and then I'll make a handle. So I drilled out these two support blocks, which are going to go at either end like this, or maybe this way around, I haven't decided yet. And this is going to sit in between them, so the bearings will just drop in the blocks like that. And that one can go through there. That one's going to go in there. I think that'll do. So I drilled some countersunk holes in there and stick some screws in. The threadless one on as a spacer, poke it through the end, and hallelujah. So to make the handle, I drilled a couple of holes in a piece of bar, so it's going to go on there with a couple of nuts, and I'm going to take this bolt, bolt it in that end, cut the end off it and round it off, and we should have a little handle. So that's the little handle. It's just a 1/4 inch bolt with the head cut off. So while I was sanding the printing off this thing, it occurred to me that at some point when I'm winding the secondary, which is 28 gauge, very fine wire, I need some way to terminate it at the end, and I don't really want to leave just the skinny wire hanging out the end because it's a bit fragile. And the same thing at the top, so I thought what I would try is drill a couple of holes, and we'll feed some thicker wire up, round and back, and then we can solder the fine wire to the top of it there and solder it to it there, or maybe feed it through. I don't know yet about the top, because at the top where the high voltage is up here, we really don't want any sharp edges here. It wants to be all nice and smooth. So jury's still out about the top edge, but I thought for the bottom what I'd do is I'd take some 14 gauge household wire and pull out one of the strands, which I can't get hold of for the moment. There we go. And then strip a bit off the end. A bit more maybe. And then I thought I could poke that up through and back down, which I suspect is harder than it looks. And then the idea would be that in the final assembly, which is going to have this on the bottom, that wire could go out just down through the bottoms, because we're going to have a primary coil around here, so this can go out through the bottom and get hooked up down there. So you can see that down in there, but got that bent over. And of course, if I'd made one of these before, this would all look very professional and finished, but because we're doing this live, so to speak, sometimes things don't come out quite the way we planned. So So I've got that pretty much scrunched down in there. Just make sure that's not going to hit the rod. Oh, I so hate the fact that this hole is not in the center. Oh, it's very tempting to rebore that and then sleeve it with something, because I think it's going to be pretty tedious to do this. I'm estimating that I'm going to get about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 turns on there. Maybe closer to 1,000, because I've made this a little shorter than I was going for originally. And so if we're doing at this speed, which is like 1 revolution a second, 1,000 second is going to greatly exceed my attention span, but we'll see. Okay, so I painted 2 coats of varnish on this. I put some tape around the ends here so that, I'll show you that, so that I wouldn't cover up my little piece of copper that I put in before. And so I have the whole tube covered, and just for giggles I painted some of my electrical liquid tape around what's going to be the hot end, just to remind me that that's going to be the hot end. And once we're finished, I'm probably going to paint that stuff all over. So this is the wire that I'm actually going to use. It's 28 gauge and came from Remington online. And this is a 4-ounce spool, and there's 500 feet on here. Now, it doesn't look like very much, but this is going to be enough to do this whole thing. So I cut 3 little bits of wood. I'm going to screw these together like this, so that the spool fall on the floor, so that the spool will sit in between. And I found this piece of tube, which is from some sort of hanging ceiling lamp thing, which happens to fit through the hole through there, so I'm going to hack that off. Use that as the shaft, and I think we'll be good. Okay, so now I've got a little holder for my spool of wire that can sit behind here, and I think I'll feed the wire down underneath out to this side and apply it with a finger while I wind the handle. So take the enamel off the end of the little piece of copper wire. I've got a little square of sandpaper, and I'm just going to fold it in half and put it over the wire and just fold it and pull. And you probably can't see this very well, but the end of the wire there is pretty nice and shiny now. I'm going to feed the end through my little loop of copper wire on here. And again, remember, it doesn't matter whether I have a sharp end here or not, because this is going to be the low voltage side, so it won't be, this isn't going to be spraying plasma into the cosmos. So cut the end off and cut a very skinny piece of tape. And use this to hold the wire in place. So that's the beginning there. And I think we're ready to start winding. So I've got here on my coil support, I've got some bits of tape ready for, I was about to say disaster later, let's hope it's not disaster. I'm just noticing that there are some kinks in this wire that you really don't want, but we're going to make a start. So see how far we get with this afternoon. It's horrible when I let go. Alright, I'm going to put a bit of tape on now. As far as I've gotten. So I'm just keeping my finger just slightly behind the point that the wire is going on. So it just sits up snugly against the previous turn. Got a bit of a gap there. It doesn't really matter if we get the odd gap here or there. It's not going to really make that much difference. What we care about here is just getting as many turns on as we can reasonably without having the wire overlapping anywhere. Well, it's hard to believe, but the spool of wire has got probably 20 turns left on it, if that, just as I got to the little red band that I put on there, so that turned out to be pretty good. So I've taped it temporarily. What I need to do now is put a ring of decent tape around there, and put some red electrical tape around there all the way around, with the wire coming out this way, and then I'm going to wrap it around here and tape it on there temporarily, because I can't put it through the two little holes in here without taking this whole thing apart, and I want to varnish all of this before I do that. So, okay, so I've gotten to the end. I came back down here, I put a bit of black electrical tape around here just to cover up my copper wire connection so it doesn't get varnish on it before I can solder it up. And then at this end, there's a bit of red electrical tape around here just where the high voltage end is, and that's my high voltage wire coming out of there, and I've got a few turns wound around this cap. So what I'm going to do now is put a good coat of varnish on this. So I'm going to put some varnish on. This is, what is this? Polyurethane oil-based outdoor varnish, which actually I use on a lot of my yard art projects to protect the paint. But today it's going on here, so I'm just painting this on top of everything. We want to get a decent coat on here, so I'm going to put it on fairly thickly and then come back over it in a minute. So I thought we'd have a look at the coil after I finish varnishing it. And I got fed up after 5 coats. I've just finished the last one, it's not dry yet. I've been actually painting it on and then rotating the little handle and drying it with a hairdryer until it doesn't get goopy, just so that it won't run. Well, minor disaster yesterday. Let's see if I can get in a bit closer here. The liquid electrical tape reacted with the varnish and generated an awful lot of gas bubbles, and the whole thing destroyed the varnish layer. So the electrical stuff dries in 5 to 10 minutes, enough to be able to peel it off. So I've taken that back off, and I still want to be able to insulate the top part of the sorry about the focus. I still want to be able to insulate the top part of the tube, so I'm going to actually use over this area here. Let's see if I can show you. I'm actually going to use some of this self-amalgamating rubber tape here on the right to cover part of the tube. So I wrapped a layer of this self-amalgamating electrical insulation tape around the top part of the tube. It's a sort of rubber compound that sticks to itself and eventually becomes a fairly solid barrier. I'm going to give the rubber a coat of the red electrical stuff, the liquid stuff, mostly because it'll look nicer, I think. We'll see. Bit of a disaster yesterday, so try not to get any of the liquid electrical tape on the varnish area. I added a little bit of red PVC electrical tape, a band just to mark where I was starting, and that's going to be the limit of where I put the liquid electrical tape. Okay, so the result of painting it with the one layer of the electrical tape stuff is not particularly elegant, but it's sealed up all the cracks, I think. So yesterday I made this little table out of some wood that I had lying around, and I'm gonna mount the PVC adapter through the hole, and there's a small threaded coupler that I cut in half yesterday to make a nut, and I'll show you the back side of this. I used a big force and a bit to relieve it a little bit because the thread's not terribly long on the adapter. So that's the nut done up on the underside, and that's the adapter sitting in the top, so I'm going to be able to drop the secondary coil pipe right in that, and its wire will go down through the hole in the middle. So it's in the stand. Took the PVC end caps off. That was a bit of a struggle. To do that I had to wrap a sheet of latex rubber around the winding so I could grip it, and then put a pair of big grips on the end caps. And I don't know if you can see, but the end winding went up and down through these two little holes a few times. Let's see if I can zoom in a bit closer and see that. Yeah, there. So the end winding I took down and up around these two holes a couple of times, and it comes out the middle at the top, so when the end cap's sitting on there, it'll be through the hole in the end cap.